There's another homeless person, probably an alcoholic or drug addict. Sometimes I want to help them, give them money, but they will just use it for alcohol or drugs. Besides, they're kind of scary to me. They are dirty, maybe crazy. I don't want to get too close. They just need to pull up their bootstraps like everyone else.
Meritocracy is a myth.
Stigma, generational trauma, abuse, and poverty, among other things, cut those bootstraps for many of the homeless people we interviewed. Take Sarah, for example. Her father molested her when she was a girl and passed her among his friends. When her daughter was born, child to child, she didn't know who the father was. Her father, he had his own abusers. Paul's father didn't know the neighbor abused him when he was 5. He was busy with his own addiction, and the abuse and neglect weighs on Paul to this day. Robert lived in 6 different foster homes. They weren't all bad, he says, but he was beaten in one and raped in another.
Richard describes his father as bone-breaking abusive. He explains that his mother didn't mean to throw him away. She had her own trauma, and he was using drugs at 11 years old. What was she supposed to do, he asks. These folks started with less than nothing.
No bootstraps.
Maybe we should just ship them all to Idaho or somewhere out of the county. It's not my problem. I have enough to worry about just trying to live my own life. I'm supposed to feel sorry for them? I go to work every day. Come on. Really? They must like it or they would do something about it. After all, isn't it their choice to live the way they do?
Is addiction a choice or a disease? The scientist debate will go on, but what kind of choice do children have? Nearly every person interviewed started using drugs in childhood. The average age of drug initiation among those who started young?
12 years old.
It was a normal part of life, they told us, introduced to them by family or friends, and it numbed the pain of loneliness, neglect, and abuse. Others talked about physical trauma like degenerative arthritis and fused vertebrae. Their choice came out of unmanageable pain and addiction to prescription medication. Moving from prescription meds to heroin is not as hard as it sounds once you understand how sick you feel when you can no longer get
Oxycodone,
Oxycontin,
Vicodin,
Percocet. One man described dope sickness as a profound physical, psychological, and spiritual pain. So maybe we're not asking the right question when we ask, is addiction a choice or a disease? Maybe instead we should ask, how can we help people cope with the physical and emotional trauma they use street drugs to treat?
I take responsibility.
Why don't they just use the services that are out there? All us hardworking citizens are paying for them anyway. Is it because they're lazy, drunk, or high? I am tired of them wanting handouts and all these do-gooders feeling sorry for them and trying to make everyone else feel guilty. They make the community look bad, bring down property values, and scare people away from businesses.
Okay, what about 28-year-old Ben? He was honorably discharged from Special Forces after 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, with 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. It wasn't until he was locked up in Seattle that he was told about his VA benefits. He was a platoon leader, and in one night he lost 9 guys in his squad of 12. 1 year later, he overdosed on the military meds he was taking to dull the pain of that night. The next thing he knew, he was stateside, living out of his car. He couldn't afford the painkiller, so he started using heroin. He's been evicted repeatedly because he couldn't remain abstinent. He cycled in and out of jail, shelters, and drug treatment, trying to manage his PTSD. He didn't fail the system failed him. Sarah's no different. She went from her abusive father to sex work on the street, and when she was arrested, she was ordered to stay out of areas of prostitution. The problem is that many of the social services in Tacoma are located in these designated areas, which makes it very difficult to get even a meal, let alone a drug and alcohol assessment, without risking arrest for simply walking across an invisible line. Punitive measures are not the answer.
What can I really do to help? Maybe listen? Sit together brainstorming the issues that keep drug users homeless and on the street? I wonder what they would say if I asked them
what they needed
from me to help them make their lives better. What would permanent supportive housing look like to them? What if by having this housing they would truly be a part of the community? We need conversations, community building, because
All stigma does is keep people down, pushing them to the edges of our socio-spatial exclusion.
Banishment.
They mirror our desired social distance from them with self-stigma and suicidal thoughts. Heroin numbs the pain of self-disgust perfectly. It numbs everything, says Sarah. Imagine that. We perceive that our disdain of their behavior will discourage their drug use. But as with all wicked problems, our disdain has unintended consequences. In this case, it exacerbates drug use. So the next time you see someone who appears to be homeless, drug-seeking,
Junkie.
remember they might also be a decorated war veteran, a musician, a person desperately coping with their traumatic past. If you wonder what you can do, the answer is simple.
Don't turn a blind eye.
Instead, say hello and know that nearly everyone who was interviewed said that you would be communicating more than a customary greeting. You would be telling that person that you see them and they're worth your time.
Everyone matters.
I think